Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 574, and today's date is January 24th, 2015, and the title of this episode is The Current Economic Collapse News Brief. Now, we understand those nations that have sanctions on them and those nations that belong to the BRIC system, they're trying to do whatever they possibly can to de-dollarize, separate themselves from the Western banking system. We see Russia doing it. We see China doing it. And now we see Iran. Iran has no longer using the US dollar in foreign trade. In trade exchanges with foreign countries, Iran is using other currencies, including the yuan, euro, Turkish lira, and many other currencies, and they have stopped using the dollar. So the de-dollarization is complete, and all this as the US tries to broker this anti-nuclear accord, and we can see right now that they're not even dealing in dollars at this point. And we see a lot of countries that are doing this where they're saying, you know what, we do not want to deal in the dollar, we want to separate ourselves from it. We see a lot of nations also making deals with China, bilateral trade agreements, because they are protecting themselves for when the dollar collapses. And many of the countries around the world, like New Zealand, Australia, Switzerland, many countries in Europe, UK, Canada, they have all been making deals with China, setting up hubs and making sure they are protected for when the dollar collapses. And we can see a lot of nations are just no longer even dealing in the dollar, especially in Africa right now. China has a huge foothold in Africa, and we can see a lot of the nations there are ramping up their reserves with yuan and renminbi, and we see they're shrinking their dollar reserves as they set up different clearinghouses in Africa, one being in Kenya. And we can see this is spreading, and we can see right now that yes, the yuan renminbi is slated to be a reserve currency. The IMF is going to take a look at this and run it through some tests. And of course, the United States is most likely going to try to stop this any way they possibly can, because they do not want this to happen. Now, here in the United States, we understand during the State of the Union, and I mentioned this before, that Obama was talking about how he was going to increase taxes on the rich. He's going to cut taxes for the Middle East, for the middle class. And we can see right now that basically what he's doing is just a shell swap game with what he's calling rich and taxes. Obama's slick distraction is going after capital gains, saying he is raising taxes on the rich for the benefit of the middle class. He will close the loopholes for the rich that allows them to leave wealth to their children. First, anyone who invests money, he is calling rich. So if you went into the stock market with $100,000 and you invested, you are rich, and you will be taxed on those capital gains if your investment pans out. So is he really taxing the rich at this point? No, he's actually taxing the middle class. He's also taxing those people who save for college. Is that really taxing the rich? No. He's promising, again, free college for everyone anyone that's going to a 2-year community college. Is it really free? No, what he's doing is he's robbing the savings plans of the middle class. He's no longer going to give them tax benefits to save. He's going to take that money. So all of this is a scam. Saving for a 4-year education plus medical or law school will no longer be tax-free. Obviously, a 4-year education is for the rich to be paid for after taxes. The free education is a local community college, not a university of your choice. Already, about 40% of community college students' tuition is covered by federal and state aid. So he is cleverly taxing savings while attributing this to a benefit to be funded by the rich. Anyone looking to get accepted to a university outside of where he lives will now have to earn every penny after taxes. And 4 years plus is now all funded after tax. Think about what he's doing right now. This is a slick way to wipe out savings for the middle class families with household income well below the $250,000 mark, which will be the vast majority of the middle class here in the United States. And we can see right now that he's not taxing the rich. He's taxing everybody in the middle class. He's stealing the last portion of everyone's money and transferring it to the government and to the 1%. This is exactly what he is doing. Because this is what a nation does when it is collapsing. They rob, they steal, they pillage the rest of the wealth from the people. It's wealth transfer to the 1%. This is exactly what's going on right now. And you have to remember, the government is looking for revenue everywhere possible. They tried Obamacare, they tried FATCA, none of it's panning out. There is no money left. The American people are tapped out. But they're squeezing as much as they possibly can. Now, out in Ukraine, we understand the war efforts are being ramped up. We understand American troops are headed into Ukraine. These are, of course, called advisors. We know they're combat-ready Marines. We understand that Kiev has its orders from the central bank to push war any way possible. Doesn't matter if you have false flags or use them. Just do whatever you can to get this war started. And we see today that Mariupol was hit by rocket fire, and about 30 people have died. So far we've seen a bus hit, a trolley or tram system hit, and now it's in Mariupol. The big question is, and of course they're blaming this on Donetsk, the southeastern people. If they're trying to gain public support and they want to be separate and apart from the Kiev government, and they're protecting the people, and they're saying it's for the people, why would they attack their own people? Does it make sense? Why would they carelessly bomb their own bus, attack their own tram? It makes no sense, because public opinion would look at this and say, oh, wait a minute, why would we let them be separate and apart from Ukraine? Look what they're doing. It's terrorism. But this is what Kiev wants it to look like. It's called a false flag. It's to push the war effort, and I said this before. They're going to do everything they possibly can to make it look like they, the southeastern people, are doing this. But as we know, Kiev is behind all of this, because they're the ones who lost everything. Donetsk didn't lose anything. They're holding their own. They're holding their area. Kiev lost the southeastern region. Kiev lost Crimea, and the central bankers are pissed. They're angry. They want it all back. This isn't what they paid for. The Donetsk people are saying our militias have no weapon systems near Mariupol that would be able to shell that region. Our positions are simply too far away. According to our intelligence, the artillery fire came from Staria Krim neighborhood, less than 10 kilometers from central Mariupol. Ukrainian troops are stationed there. We believe it was a provocation committed by the Ukrainian troops. Kiev is doing everything to make the rebels move their forces, which are now holding the Donetsk airport. They want them to come to Mariupol and leave part of their forces in the airport so they can try to retake it. And we can see right now, the Ukrainian military is using the citizens of Mariupol for this. They're saying it's horrific, it's terrible. Look what the people there did in the southeast region. And now, all of a sudden, they're calling a UN Security Council meeting. Donetsk is out there saying Kiev has passed the blame to the Donetsk people. militia for its own accidental Grad missile attack on the southeastern Ukrainian city of Mariupol. Until this day, we have not been operating near Mariupol. We are saving our energy, but now, after Kiev decided to place the blame for its accidental Grad missile attack on the residential area on us, I gave an order to suppress Ukraine troops' positions located to the east of Mariupol, and this is coming from the Donetsk leader. We see that Ukraine has called for a extraordinary session of the parliament, and of course this is to wage war. We understand the U.S. is directing all of this because, as we know and as we said, this ceasefire that Russia kind of initiated, they went along with to replenish the military assets, to replenish their troops, to bring in lethal weapons, and to get aid from the United States government. And the United States government needed that time to pass the legislation which supports the Ukrainian side. So we can see right now, war is on. They're ready to push this hard as they possibly can. And this will escalate as time goes on. Now, out in the Middle East, we understand the government in Yemen has fallen. And one day after the Yemeni president announced his resignation, U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry and French President issued similar calls for a comprehensive expansion of NATO military and intelligence operations throughout the Middle East and Africa during the World Economic Forum in Davos. So they're ready to go into Yemen. They're ready to go into Libya. They're ready to push their offensive forward. This is what they needed. Kerry cited numerous countries as prime targets for new Western military incursions. We must eliminate Daesh, which is the Islamic State, strengthen Somalia, intensify our efforts in Nigeria, and strike at the tentacles of Al-Qaeda in Yemen, and maneuver into Libya. Kerry also pointed to Central African Republic, Libya, and Afghanistan as countries where new long-term military interventions had become necessary. So basically what he's saying is that they need to get into Nigeria, which they've been trying to get into. They use Boko Haram, the terrorist organization, and the Nigerian government will not let the United States government put troops into that country, and they need to ramp that up. They need to go into Yemen because the government has fallen there. They need to go into Libya because the government has fallen there. And they need to ramp up military personnel in Afghanistan. And we can see they're getting ready for an all-out war throughout the Middle East, Africa, and the entire region. This is what they're saying at this point. Now, the Pentagon says that the U.S. military assets are ready to go if anything happens in Yemen. We have now, for several days, had resources, naval resources in particular there, and ready to respond at a moment's notice. This is coming from Kirby. Kirby said, when asked if there were changes in the U.S. military presence around Yemen, there's constant contingency planning going on in a dynamic situation like this. So they're getting ready, they're getting prepared, and they might make the leap into going into Yemen and restoring the puppet government there. And we can see they need to do this in Libya. They need to do this in Yemen. They understand this. This is why they're using the Islamic State Al-Qaeda combination, because wherever they are, this is where the U.S. government will go. And it's these places where they need to get back into, or places where they need to go. Now, we understand that Syria is in the middle of peace talks with the opposition. Now, of course, the United States was not involved in this whatsoever. They did not want to be involved. Representatives of Syria's main opposition groups have reached an agreement that the Syrian conflict can only have a political solution. The purpose of the negotiations process is the transition to a democratic regime and a civil sovereign state. The conflict in Syria can only have a national political solution. And we can see right now they're looking to continue the talks, and they're going to meet in Moscow from January 26th to the 29th. Now, the United States is not involved with this because they do not want peace. And again, we had the Geneva talks. They want to restart the Geneva talks. And when we had the Geneva talks with the United States government, the opposition, and Assad, the only thing that was on the agenda was to remove Assad. They had nothing else to talk about. The same thing's happening right now. The United States government does want to be involved in this because they don't want a political solution. They want Assad removed. They will take this in phases. They will take part of the country and then eventually go after Assad. So we can see they will do anything they possibly can to get Assad. This is their goal. This has always been their goal. It has never changed. The only thing that will change is their tactic and how they approach it. So right now, we have the opposition, and all the opposition is broken into different factions. Part of this opposition faction is talking peace. Another opposition is not talking peace, but don't worry, they don't care about that anymore because they have the Islamic State. That is their proxy army right now. They're really not supporting the Free Syrian Army. Basically what's happening is they're training them, they're providing them with weapons, and then the Free Syrian Army kind of moves over to the Islamic State. And this is what's been happening on an ongoing basis. Now we see the 2 Japanese hostages. One of them was beheaded. There was a video that was put out there. And a video has reportedly appeared on the internet showing one of the Japanese hostages held by the jihadists, the Islamic State. He claimed his companion was executed and said the Islamic State want him swapped for a female suicide bomber. Kenji Goto shows a picture of the beheaded body of his fellow captive, and all of this is coming again from the Site Intel Group, which is run by Rita Katz, which is all propaganda. If you ever notice, they cannot show us the links or where they got any of this. They just seem to happen to get all of this information, and we know it's all fake, phony, and false, and we can see they're trying to push their agenda as hard as they possibly can to get Japan now into the mix. And we can see that all of this is being done to scare the entire world. Why are they doing this? They're doing it because they're trying to push their agenda for war. Look what's happening right now around the globe. In Ukraine, war is being ramped up. They're getting ready for a major offensive in Iraq and Syria, Libya, Yemen, which eventually will include Lebanon. We have troops in Africa. We have the pivot to Asia encircling China. They are being contained, and everything is being ramped up at this point. We can see war is coming. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.